Oath by Stan Lippard. Lippard. It's spelt French. Oath by Stan Lippard. Anyway, on to the. I did it again? How? Oh. Darn it. What? We're learning. I'm just gonna have to roll with it. At least the very beginning of the stream isn't me flubbing. No, it's too close to 2 o'clock for me to try again. Thank you for the like. Well, that's what I get when I throw a stream together in a hurry. Cheese, blues, blues, okay. Anyway, here we go. Oh, we have this guy that I've been leveling up. Looking all badass. We're all murderers. Oh my god. And then we have my main. What the hell is a cheat? Darn it. Ah, it's going all kinds of wrong. Got my camera pointed towards my dirty old closet. Leave me alone. Try to entertain the masses. Party of 2. Oh my goodness, I'm in picture right now in my own on my own screen. What is going on my computer? All kinds of weird stuff. Okay, yeah. I need to plan out. I've only been awake for like an hour. So this is me throwing together a stream as quickly as I can. It's streamer, yeah. Make me a stream as fast as you can, or however that song goes. And you guys, I seem to get positive results for these Guild Wars streams, which I'm shocked by, honestly. It's so fine. I'll roll with that. I love Guild Wars. I can and have and will play Guild Wars all day. And as I've said a few times before, 6 right here, that's her all year, baby. That's not her just for Halloween. She's Halloween all year round. You'll think I'm dressing up as a costume. Like, no. I'm Halloween 24/7. I'm an adorable Azura vampire. Ah, these stupid skeletons that block, like, hardly does anything, really. I mean, it just stops me from... It just makes me waste an attack. That's it. Oh. Okay. That was weird. We're dead. We're dead. The voices in my head are louder than usual. Down, boy. And now I'm just getting into the zone now. It's flat out like going through the labyrinth, waiting for people to show up, I guess. Actually, you know what? I should check to see how much. I mean, I have definitely collected enough candy corn to trade in for something by now. I must have. I must have. You know what's funny is the whole reason that I got that like in the first place is because of my fuck up at the beginning. So that means for continuity's sake, I'm not going to be deleting that minute fuck up from earlier. It's just so I'm just gonna have a weird minute long stream just hanging there like a booger for no good reason. Unless you actually watch it and understand the context. It's kind of funny, I guess. And then I just explained it. So now it's extra funny. Okay, let's trade in some of this stuff. I just thought it'd be weird. It's like, huh? Now I can't really delete that. It's maybe a minor continuity loss. Continuity. My life is continuity. Oh God, no, 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 no. I'm not. I don't know what the point is of giving him shit. But I think maybe it's something to do with a raffle. Oh, look, there's somebody, there's another Azura. No, not you. With the costume, like, how it's supposed to look, basically. I dyed mine and made it look a little bit different for, my big Nord guy. Made it look more like an ice thing. Whee! Ran away. Oh, what's this? It's cute. I like my bat, though. That one's mine. Nope. But, yeah, that one's mine. My pet bat. I wish you could actually interact with the minis. It'd be nice if they updated them to be, like, something you could actually do with, rather than just being a flat-out accessory. Alright, well, let's see. Who do I trade with? This guy. Yeah. Okay, you trade. Oh, really? I only have enough for one? That's surprising. I thought I had more than that by now. Oh, I haven't opened up my treat bags. Oh, look at this guy. He looks like he's from Elseed. Whoa, that's pretty tight. Whoa, that one's nice. That's a good one. Count de Monet or whatever. Yeah, dead lives matter. Good. Yes, I love it. A little dark, but I like it. That you stepped over a joke tripwire with that one. You almost that's pretty good. Dead lives matter. That's good. That's good. You're very naughty, but like you just barely escaped a bad joke. That's impressive. It's like one of those little tight wire jokes. There is no fat on that joke. You know what? I'm gonna give the clock tower another go. Is there any point to the explorable version? I don't even know what you get. Okay, well, whatever. Let's give it a try, and then I'm going back to the labyrinth because that's the only place I know. Clock tower, good try. You should always say that. Except for when I go to the labyrinth. You're always disappointed somehow when I go to the labyrinth. Like, oh, come on, try our other stuff. It's only a muddle. That looks like some Final Fantasy IX like design right there. That mask. He looks like Blank. Whoops. Oh boy, I'm gonna regret being in first person. I sure hope I can zoom out in time. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. All right, and I gotta remember that I need to stop before. Yeah, right here. Gotta wait. Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! No! Ah, that is. It's tricky. It's tricky. I'm looking at my footage, seeing if. Let's see. No, I just gotta be faster. Do I really have to wait 8 minutes before, like, the next round starts? That's lame. Okay, yeah, Labyrinth. It's the best place to grind for candy corn or anything else. Oh, I forgot to open up my treat bags. I, yeah, here we go. It's not that much. I'm not gonna have enough for. Nice. Oh, well, I've certainly done that. Just 10, what, 10 in a day? I've opened like hundreds upon hundreds.
This is rather rare.
Let's see. Cool. More finishers for me. I'm almost maxed out. Can I max out? Is it possible to max out? I wonder. What happens then? Can I sell them?
Oh, I know of a good use for this.
Lots of just stuff that you get the click and you're like, ooh, lots of whooshy whooshy. It feels good stuff. Ooh. Oh, Yeah, see, this game just loves throwing rewards at you. Oh, shit. I got a couple more of these. Ah, ah, ah. Ah, ah, ah. Ah, ah, ah. Oh, yay, I got more toilet paper. Check this out. Woo! Woo! Totally pointless, doesn't do anything, but I love it. I definitely want to stock up on as much of that as possible. Uh, I don't know what to do with this. Oh, another bag. Like, I've gotten a couple of these, and I don't know what they're for. They must be something I have to trade for, because, like, I've opened so many of these bags, and I've only gotten, like, 2 of them. Hey, Mr. Mad King! Mr. Mad King, can I talk to you? What happens if I just straight up fly into him? Hey. Oh, he didn't like that.
How'd
Oh.
that feel? Excruciating?
He's done worse. Ah, he even spawned me next to a pumpkin. Not a pumpkin. A squash. Ah, shoot. Okay, next thing. Okay, good. Another door over here. Another haunted door.
There's the power.
You know, next thing I should probably do is actually put on something to watch while I play this. That way I have something to commentate on while no one's here. That's pretty easy for me to do. Not the worst idea. But I'm also kind of just into this world. The only MMO I've found that I can totally just get into it without needing a podcast.
My defenses are down.
I love that if I get trapped, I can use the spectral form to get out of it. I mean, that's just fucking nice. The skeleton's making xylophone noises. It's so fucking good. I want to play as much of this as possible before these maps disappear for a whole nother year.
I am dead.
It's gonna suck when they're gone.
There's the power.
Maybe I should take a note from the people who work at EVE Online and just like become a dev so that I can get access to the servers even when people aren't around. Dude, has anybody watched that? I should watch that while I'm playing. Holy crap, has anybody seen the new Down the Rabbit Hole? By the way, Down the Rabbit Hole's back. Hello. Let me get to the next freaking door. Yeah, okay. this, and now I'm gonna log out. Oh shit! Just as another player gets by too, but that's something I could put on. Hot damn, yeah. I mean that's 5 hours long. Have you guys heard about the new Down the Rabbit Hole? Yeah, you know, first Quite comes back, yay, and now Down the Rabbit Hole's back, yay. Although granted, Down the Rabbit Hole didn't get canceled. They've just been busy for 2 years documenting the most insane thing ever. Although this is going to be great PR for EVE Online. I'm definitely throwing that up. I'll start it from the beginning.
Tires Plus, you're in the driver's seat.
Just for the stream's sake. Even though I'm already 2 hours in. That's not that in the rabbit. Oh my god, I don't care about the new Hunger Games movie. You know, the Hunger Games franchise could have been something interesting, even if it is. It could have been its own thing. To me, it's just kind of boring. It's just like, it's very. I get hard Twilight vibes from it, and it shouldn't. I shouldn't be getting that. Which, again, you had something there where that's kind of part of the point. That's kind of part of the sort of dance puppet dance hierarchy you were going for, but nah, you played into it too hard, and now it's just like oh my god. The ad that I just saw was literally people in Times Square screaming over actors in the movie a la Twilight, you know, so it's like not exactly making me want to see it. Anyway, super off topic. Oh, thank you for the like. Yeah, this EVE Online business is insane. So I'm going to throw that on. Like, again, I'm about 2 hours in, and I probably missed a thing or two while watching it, to be fair. I'm dumb as hell. But it'll probably be about right. See, that'll cover up the chat, too, in the game. So, perfect. Put that there for me, and that should work out perfectly. Alright, let's go to some.
How'd that feel? Excruciating?
Plus, the sound of my game gives people incentive to watch it on their own, so I'm not taking away views.
For over 20 years, the simulated world of New Eden has run in near perpetuity. While information about this world is readily available, much of it is indecipherable to the outside observer, replete with jargon and references meaningful only to those who have spent years in the community. On occasion, mainstream news outlets will write articles about the results of battles involving thousands of players and virtual assets valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars, massive exchanges in wars fought for arcane reasons between belligerents with convoluted backgrounds. People who spend their time in New Eden will begin to discuss their experiences in the game and their participation in historic events, but their gravity is often difficult to fathom for those without the same knowledge or experience. Others endeavor to chronicle particular aspects of its history, such as harrowing acts of subterfuge and its ever-shifting borders and alliances. Many who hear about this world agree that, while fascinating, they would never attempt to join it themselves, citing its complexity and depth. And so, for most, a single question
I haven't
remains.
even summoned my minions. I'm dumb as hell.
What is EVE Online?
Hey boy! Ooh, buckle in, baby. The, I mean, this gets into actual like IRL interstellar war stuff. Is like, and that's just what I know about. Who knows how frickin' crazy this gets later. That, yeah, the Titan. Alright, I'm gonna adjust the sound a little bit. Let me see if I, oh, wait, teleport real quick.
During the early 1990s, software developers were exploring the possibilities of the internet, a relatively new invention at the time. Interactive online spaces such as multi-user dungeons and forums were shared by millions of people, but it was clear to everyone using and creating these spaces
There'll be
that there
more
was
of this
much more
internet.
potential. Internet technology was rapidly improving and changing,
Can I watch Down
and
the Rabbit
developers
Hole
had
on
to
it?
make
Can I
certain
watch
that their
Chris
creations
Chan on
could
it?
keep pace. Even more difficult, however, was balancing the ever-changing needs and desires of users with the services being created. As personal computers became more widespread and their rendering capabilities increased, developers grew more and more interested in simulated, three-dimensional environments shared over the internet as the natural progression of forums. And of these developers, there were few as ambitious as the Icelandic company Oz Interactive and their creation, Oz Virtual. During the preceding decades, cyberpunk novelists had envisaged immersive, multi-sensory virtual experiences enabled by powerful computers networked with one another, and software developers had used these stories as inspiration to create worldwide web browsers that allowed users to explore websites in 3 dimensions, utilizing a coding language called the Virtual Reality Markup Language, or VRML, as opposed to the Hypertext Markup Language, or HTML. Founded in 1992, Oz Interactive sought to expand upon this concept and offer a VRML web browser that allowed users to interact with other users who were visiting the website at the same time, with each person represented by their own 3D avatar, and even allowing for simultaneous voice communication, a remarkable progression for the time. However, their location
I really like
made
those
development
graphics.
difficult.
Bring those graphics
Iceland's
back.
internet was connected to the rest of the world by a single modem, and the country would turn off
It like
this
makes me
modem
think of the
during
bald
the
guy
night when few people were
teaches
using
math.
it. Still, development would
whatever
continue
that
for the
viral
next
horror
4
game
years
was.
until 1996, when they finally launched the beta version of Oz Virtual. Soon, other companies began forming partnerships with Oz Interactive, including Time Warner, Ericsson, the Van Gogh Museum, and Atlantic Records, to create bespoke worlds within Oz Virtual for them. Most notably, Intel cooperated with Oz Interactive to recreate a New York nightclub in Oz Virtual, then utilize a motion capture system on the performers at the club to host a party in both the real and virtual spaces simultaneously. However, the company soon realized that the concept of Oz Virtual, like many others of its ilk, was a product developed too early for the market, and a small group of developers and artists, as well as a single historian,
Oh, look,
left
she's got the
Oz
same butcher knife as
Interactive
me.
and found their own company in 1997,
And it's scaled.
which they named
Oh
Crowd
man, I
Control
want my butcher
Productions,
knife to be...
or,
Okay,
as it
well,
is
my butcher
commonly
knife's still pretty big.
abbreviated,
I want it to be bigger.
CCP. Where this small group had once spent their time developing tech demos,
That's
they
neat.
were
It's the
now
same butcher knife.
interested in creating
That's
a
the
finished
first time I've
product.
seen somebody
And
else
so,
with that.
they decided that they would develop
Why was there a
something
toilet on the
remarkably
screen for
different,
that part?
a board game.
I remember
Leveraging
this.
The design
This is
experience of its
interesting.
initial members, they quickly constructed their game, which they christened Heituspiel, or Danger Game. Produced in conjunction with Alcoholics Anonymous, the game saw players fighting against one another, and occasionally making tenuous
Who'da thunk it?
alliances as they attempted to break the cycle of addiction to various substances.
Like, have
Core
they
to the
translated
game's
this to
mechanics
English? Because
was
I
a
would
focus
love
on
to play
sharp
this.
consequences for failure and the ability to interfere with others' play. In the game design documents, the first line read, "Death is a serious matter." Hyttespiel was widely successful in Iceland, and soon it had sold a copy to 1/8 of households in the country, bringing this small, independent company of designers a significant influx of capital. But rather than continuing to make board games, the company returned to the concept that had driven them to work together in the first place. While the design and technology they had made for Oz Virtual was produced too early for its initial purpose, they envisaged a game made with the same concepts and some of the same technology. And so, in 1999,
how do I get that paper
using
bag?
the money
I want
they
that.
had earned from Hyttespiel, they
Okay.
began work
That's
on a
easy.
space-themed, massively multiplayer online game. At first, the designers attempted a
I
two-dimensional
only just
style,
realized that
but
I'm
the
playing
team
an
decided
MMO while
quickly that they
listening to a
wanted
documentary
create
about
something
one.
more
It didn't even
reminiscent of a
occur to
movie.
me.
And soon, they settled on a three-dimensional style that placed the player in a ship out in space against a backdrop of planets and stars, and they began releasing trailers in the year 2000.
That wasn't the
Publishers were
reason I put it
initially
on. I
unwilling to
genuinely put it
believe
on
that the
because
graphics in the
it was just
trailers
something I
were
wanted to
rendered in
watch.
real time, but after they had been convinced, CCP was able to secure the
Gosh darn it.
funding they felt necessary to make the game that they wanted, which they named EVE Online, the second Genesis. Their ambitions, however, were far more than graphical. Supporting the core gameplay would be a complicated system of economics described as hyper-capitalistic by its CEO. All resources available in the game would be gathered, traded, processed, and utilized by players with little management from the company. Like their board game Hyttespiel, the first line in the design document read, "Death is a serious matter," and, invoking biblical language,
place is a
this
lot
game
more
world
populated
was
now.
given the name New Eden. When development began in earnest, the company had approximately 20 people, most of them from Oz Virtual, while most others were direct contacts of the initial members from Oz, including some whose relationship had been made by playing Ultima Online with them, another early MMORPG. One of the most challenging aspects of creating EVE would be its scaling. Rather than splitting the player base into multiple different instances to reduce the load on servers, the team decided that they would place everyone in the world onto a single massive instance, or game world, with thousands of stars, using different servers for different in-game regions. In an interview with gaming magazine IGN, the lead designer and art director, Rainier Harderson, said, quote, "I would say the hardest thing to implement must be the server backend. Apart from that, the biggest challenges in doing EVE would be that
I
there
love
are
these
so many things
glow-in-the-dark
that we are doing in the game
skeletons.
that have never been
I
done
love that
before.
they vary
This means
them
that there are a
from
lot of
regular
conceptual
skeletons to
problems that
glow-in-the-dark.
we have
So
had to
fun.
solve without having any reference to in previous games. For instance, when we started out, the only third-person space game we had seen was Homeworld, and that was a real-time strategy game. So that meant that we had no reference whatsoever in how to navigate spaceships from a third-person viewpoint. Another example are
that's the
uncertainties that
incentive,
rise due to the
for the
technical
races. It's
limitation
nice to
of
see your
being a
username up
massively
there.
multiplayer game. How is collision detection handled on the server? How will the physics model run? Will real solar system sizes work in the game? Yes, they do, to an accuracy of 30 centimeters. Million security issues, etc. End quote. During production, the team decided upon an
Insane.
iterative process which, while effective, was arduous.
Early on, we saw immediately that this couldn't be done in one go. So we decided to do 11 games, basically. We would do EVE 11 times over, each version progressively moving forward to the main goal, but not try to do EVE in one step. So the first step was very simple, just get the basic client-server architecture up and running, and then we moved over to having a 3D client, and then we added all the content which had been created.
Well, I mean, that's
And
the
then we
standard
sort of added
now.
on,
That was
probably
pretty
did
innovative for the
tutorial,
time.
5 times.
I mean,
partial
they were building a
rewrites,
motherfucking
partial
world.
rewrites, about 6 times. And for each rewrite we did, there were always some components. But
Actually, no, universe, like galaxy, and it sounds like
But
I know
the first
nothing
5
of
versions
actually
were
how
almost
Eve
rewrote
works, so
from, complete
it
scratch.
sounds ambitious,
Still,
as
the
like
developers
way more
determined
ambitious than
that
I
they would be
originally
able
thought.
to overcome this and every other challenge in due course and with time to spare. Their confidence, however, would prove misplaced. At first, the team at CCP believed that they could deliver the game in late 2001 or early 2002, but as the date approached, the conclusion quickly became that they would need twice as much time to complete the first iteration of Eve.
What the
With
hell
no
is that
other
guy
reports in
using?
mid-2002,
Hang on, you're not... okay,
CCP
well,
called a
for a video this
company-wide
long, I'm not
meeting and
tempting
informed
fate
their
by
staff
rewinding,
that there
but
was
what the
no
hell
more
was that?
money remaining and that they were unable to procure any further investment.
Alienware?
Despite this,
Wow.
driven by faith in the project, some of the members of the team stated that they would continue working to finish Eve.
Nice,
According
okay,
to
cool.
Hilmar, quote, "There was a turning point, I think, around the time the company
what?
was running out of money, which I think gave people
But
this
is-
belief. We kind of had this feeling, whoa,
what?
we might actually pull this off. Of course, we believe,
Okay.
but there's a difference between believing and hoping, a turn from hope to belief." End quote. This team
I
would
guess that,
continue
this
work
is
while
just
management scrambled to
timed
find
event?
more investment money. After 3 months without pay, the company was able to reach a
I thought I
deal
was
with
just,
Simon &
staying in the
Schuster,
race.
a publishing house primarily known for books, who was attempting to expand into the field of games. This company offered to provide the funding necessary for CCP to finish their game, but the development speed necessary would be extreme. For nearly a year, the employees would all work brutal hours, sometimes 100 hours a week, desperately attempting to finish the game before the money ran out again. It was during this period that a small cadre of players were able to test a limited version of the game for the first time. For many, the concept of Eve and its simulated world of New Eden were a dream made manifest. While Eve promised many possibilities, there was no prescribed definition for success, leaving players to define success and failure for themselves. Eager to explore this sandbox, space game enthusiasts congregated
was just a
online
little
to have
mini
a
race
chance at
for the hell
testing
of
the
it.
game early. Game development is often divided
Yes.
into 3
Somebody
phases.
left the bank
An
here.
alpha stage, where the developers are still experimenting with mechanics and features, a beta stage,
Must be a
where the game's
relatively new
core
player.
mechanics have been determined and the developers are seeking to refine their game, and a final release to the general public. Some
but they can't-
studios
oh.
allow and encourage prospective players to have access to the game during the alpha and beta stages to test features and search for bugs in order to, theoretically, have a more polished release. And this practice is especially common for space games, whose
Nope, I
players
can't
are
use 'em.
particularly enthusiastic, often spending significant amounts of both time and money on their hobby. And here, the space game enthusiasts found a system ripe for exploration and experimentation. The first and most important aspect of each ship was its hull, which conferred different benefits depending on its size and specialization. Among myriad other smaller factors, each hull also had its own capacitor, which, like mana or stamina in other games, would be depleted as the ship performed actions, such as firing weapons, repairing allies, or mining asteroids. But in order to perform these actions, the ships had to be equipped with components, and each hull had a
hell
certain
is
number
going
of
on here?
slots for these components,
Why are there so
which were
many
divided into 3
Romances
types:
in one spot?
high power slots, mid power slots, and low power slots. The high power slots were typically where the most defining parts of a ship were located. Here could be found every kind of physically damaging weaponry, such as lasers and projectile turrets, as well as logistical components which allowed ships to repair one another in the middle of combat. The mid-power slots were where ships received much of their utility. For example, most ships were fitted with propulsion modules, which consumed power in order to drastically increase speed. The tools to ensnare targets
Gosh
were
darn it.
also placed in mid-power slots, including stasis webifiers and warp disruptors, which were necessary for preventing an opponent from escaping. Low-power slots were usually used to help support a ship in its given role. For example, a cargo ship might have fitted inertial stabilizers in order to travel more quickly and evade targets, while a tougher combat ship would fit components to further strengthen its armor
Normally, I
or
listen to
actively
Simon
repair
from
itself.
Warcraft.
Many mid and low power
Okay.
slots simply
During
offered
RPG
passive
busy work,
benefits to the
farming,
ship,
and
such as reducing incoming
fighting
damage
sires.
with no capacitor cost. However, each ship also had power grid and CPU
I'll check that out
limitations,
later.
meaning that a player could
Never
not
heard of it.
simply fit the most powerful components.
All I know is that, like, this is
Rather,
like the
they had to
latest thing,
carefully
and I
balance
was
the
talking
different
about it
components
earlier
to
while I
create
was
the most
playing,
powerful
so...
combinations for the lowest cost possible. Once completed, flying the ship itself was a relatively simple matter. Nearby objects could be selected in a window on the screen, allowing them to approach it, orbit it, keep it at range, or target
I actually
it.
have a copy of
Targeting a
Super
ship
Lucky
allowed the
Tail.
player to attack, heal, recharge,
Never
or
played it, though.
disrupt it with whatever
got it for
modules
free.
it had equipped. In order to use these ships and modules, the player's character would need the requisite skill points, which could only be gained passively over time,
Okay.
even when the player was logged out of the game, ensuring a more even distribution of progression for players. Numerous space game enthusiasts petitioned CCP for access, and those who were granted their request began probing EVE and making plans for
Seriously,
when
why
their
are there
friends,
so many...
clanmates, and companions
Are these guys just
could join them
farming?
and multiply their strength upon the launch of the game world. EVE had not yet been released, but already the struggle
Something's
for
going on
dominion
here.
and survival in New Eden had begun.
Oh, but yeah, one thing I thought was interesting is that people who are working on the game are already planning their
Despite
own
EVE's
colonies to
unwelcoming
form
nature,
in the
promise of
game
such a cinematic
ahead of time.
multiplayer experience was enticing to a wide
So,
breadth
like,
of
even
players
during the
and
game's
drew a
freaking
significant
development,
audience
people were
long
already
before
figuring
it
out
had
ways
been
to make
released.
money.
Starting on October
off the game.
24th, 2002,
That's kinda crazy.
a blurb appended to news releases would proclaim that the game would, quote, allow up to 100,000 gamers to compete simultaneously across a full
Yeah, I know a
3D
couple people that have played
galaxy
that
of
game. I really do need to
5,000
give it the
solar
time of day.
systems. Currently, EVE Online is in Phase 3 of beta testing, with thousands of gamers playtesting the game daily, trading in more than
I didn't really
300
understand
fan
how much
and
money
player
people
corporation
made
sites.
from
To date,
EVE
there are more
Online,
than
but it
80,000
apparently it
gamers
is
signed up for the beta test,
substantial.
and at least 50,000 are estimated to participate before the game is launched. Just like in the real world, money will be the commodity of choice. Players can earn cash by accepting work from non-player characters who will reward gamers with cash which can be traded for goods or other items. Also, gamers can earn money by working for a corporation. These corporations are comprised
it
of
actually
gamers
translates
who have
into
pooled
real
their
world money.
resources and are working together to dominate the universe. To date, there are more than 200 corporations already established, even though EVE Online has not yet been published. These corporations have elaborate web pages detailing infrastructure, location, business models, and mission statements. End quote. While this blurb emphasized competition in EVE Online, many were more excited about the concept of participating in a perpetually running economy, where the goods that they harvested or created would be actively used by other players.
It is really free form. You can choose from a lot of possibilities. You can be a market operator, you can be a transporter, miner, you can operate a factory, you can research, you can operate a big corporation, you can have careers within a corporation about being, by being the military arm or being the accountant of corporation.
A lot of the stuff that they're
And,
describing is
current
now
games,
just standard, which is
sort of
so
more focus
strange.
on having people going up against monsters, maybe in small groups, whereas EVE sort of focuses on building a society.
Well, yeah,
tools
well,
and rules
that's
to operate it.
At first, these
the big dividing factor is obviously
2003, but again, the studio needed a
coming
delay.
up.
In a press release, the
Just
art
like
director Rainier
it starts to
Hardison
actually
stated
affect the
that,
real world.
quote, We have always stood firm on the commitment to release EVE only when we
Fucking
felt
dot
it
hack
was
over
time.
here.
Although the game is nearly finished, we felt it would be best to hold off an additional 6
Not to
weeks.
mention, like,
This will allow us to
mind-blowingly
fully
elaborate.
optimize the performance of our new server cluster, implement features we have promised, and continue testing to assure
To the point of
elimination
where
of
the
bugs
players
that would
are able to take
interfere with
advantage
the
of
player's
things that
ability
even
to
the devs
enjoy the
can't.
EVE experience
That's
to its fullest
insane.
potential. End quote. These delays likely made prospective players nervous. Space Games at the time had a notorious history of
actually
ever-extending
taking down the
delays and
in-game
under-delivering
police
on
is
promised
unbelievable.
features. However,
That's like
the
actual
iterative
dot
nature of
hack shit.
MMOs such as EVE meant that any missing features could be added later, and because many players were able to test the game early, they could see how many features were being tested and what would likely be available. As promised, the team at CCP were able to meet their release goal and had sent the client to be printed by their partners for physical release in late April. And finally,
Oh shoot, I
on
forgot
May
to show off
6th,
something about my other
2003,
character
players
that I
were
got
able to play
yesterday.
the final release
Let's
of the
see,
game,
you
which
can turn it on
featured
with
a total of 5,201 star systems. But those
Just,
who had
just the Mad
participated in
Kingdom.
the alpha and beta were not novices.
I'm
Their
gonna be
months spent
disappointed
testing
when
the
it goes
game
in the
had
next
given them
couple of days.
significantly more
But I
knowledge
forgot
and
about this.
experience than those
I got my
entering
guy
New
a new
Eden for the
skin
first
for his
time,
weapon.
and they had spent months strategizing with one another to decide how their first hours, days, and weeks would be utilized in order to make the most
yeah,
money and establish their
weapon.
presence most solidly. As a cheeky
Which I
nod
really,
to their
really
home
like, but
country, the abbreviation
another one.
for Icelandic kroner and
Yeah,
the
got a
game's
great sword
currency,
here.
interstellar credits, was the same.
He
ISK.
draws it.
Many of the most organized groups
Ah,
scattered away
that's
from
so
one
cool!
another and prepared to lay claim to their own territory. However, they could not simply do
this
so
power's
anywhere.
down.
EVE's star systems are
Ah,
connected
it's
in
so
a
good.
web-like pattern with stargates, which may be used to traverse from one star to the next. In the center of this
Straight
vast
up
web
magic
is
lightsaber.
Empire space, an area controlled by the non-player
Is some kind of
empires
overlord?
where
No!
people may fly
No,
their
he's
ships
actually
in
a
relative
guardian.
Safety. The safety afforded to players is determined
Like a
by the
Templar
star's
type.
security level, given a rating anywhere
He
between
makes
0
shields.
and 1, divided into 3
And
basic
uses
categories:
lots of
high
heavy-duty
security,
tank magic.
low security, and null security, or as they are typically called, high sec, low sec, and null sec.
And he likes
In
music.
high security space, the Empire police forces, named Concord, would intervene in any aggression between players, affording some level of safety in these areas. In contrast, aggression would not summon protection in low security space, but the offending players would be granted a suspect
The
status
frickin'
that would make them
God
a
of-
target
or,
both for players and Empire
Is that one
forces.
game?
However, for the groups looking to
That
establish
was real
their own
specific.
presence in space, the most tantalizing area was Nullsec, surrounding
say
Empire
Deathstalker
space in
or
a
something?
large
Not
ring.
Deathstalker.
Here, there were no laws, no rules, and no protections, other than whatever the players could enforce, and many were eager to establish themselves in this new and vast frontier,
Well,
rich in the most valuable
I
resources.
could turn into a
But holding
motherfucking
on
bear.
to these regions would require
Like a
work
bear.
and coordination. And so, the
Boom.
corporations that had organized before the release of the game began to establish themselves in
Because I'm also a
particular
Nord.
regions of space that they found enticing. The factors involved in these choices varied from
It's a
proximity
big,
to
it's a big.
Empire space to what resources
That's the thing
were
about Guild
available.
Wars. You can
First, though,
mix
the
up a whole bunch
corporations
of
would
different
require
stuff
ships,
to make
and to
one
buy and
type of
equip these
character.
ships, they would need resources and money. While the EVE developers wanted to provide a world where the trade of goods was managed almost entirely by players, they realized that in the early stages
I'm just
of the
gonna
game,
open
no
up the map.
player economy would be established yet, and so they allowed non-player characters to buy and sell some of these commodities in order to stimulate the player economy. This provided an early revenue stream to players, who quickly devised a plan to make significant amounts of capital during this crucial early stage. This plan was based around the daily server downtime, which occurred at 11 a.m. UTC.
Nature's
Andrew
tank.
Groen detailed what he
Well, on
called the
land, yes.
merchant races in his seminal work on
And
the
there's the
history
shark.
of New Eden named Empires of Eve. Quote, Back in the earliest days of EVE, one of the best ways to make money was by buying and selling commodities in different markets across the game. Later, EVE would place all of its emphasis on a player-controlled market, but in the early days, players could buy items and wares from characters in stations all over the game and then sell them elsewhere. What resulted was a daily series of early morning races along the most profitable trade routes. Merchants would log in as quickly as possible after the server came back online from the daily maintenance shutdown and fly down the trade routes to the most profitable destinations. End quote. Trading was far from the only profession that players were looking to exploit. The factories required to build ships in EVE were a limited resource, and so, upon the release of the game, players scrambled to buy these factories as quickly as possible. However, there was an issue. Due to its worldwide release, players in the UK were able to purchase the physical copies of the game before anyone else, and therefore they could buy the factories much earlier than anywhere in the world. These buyers were more than just industrialists. Many of the factories...
Yeah, that was another thing. Like, people who got access to this game early also had a huge leg up on people in the economy of this game. So that's a big factor.
Have been purchased by real estate speculators.
Oh, yeah, and my
factories for a
I have a
higher
little
price
jackalope
with no intention of constructing
as my pet.
According
my
to
little
early
mini.
player Ramin Shahrazad,
He's great.
quote, "Within days of the retail
He was
launch,
expensive.
all factories have been bought up and idled by speculators who were charging $300 to $400 per factory without any way of knowing if they really owned the factory or not." End quote. If speculators were idling the factories, then that meant fewer ships, restricting players from accessing the core mechanics of the game. This illustrated two challenges that the developers of EVE now faced: managing a complicated economy to keep the game fun and interesting, and struggling against the black market. Black market economies for MMOs like EVE are not only common, but inevitable. While developers typically will include clauses in their terms of service that stipulate against it, players are usually undeterred from trading in-game assets for real-world currency, and the consequences for doing so only tend to involve an easily circumvented ban, which is only implemented if they're caught. And so, many of the factories intended to fabricate ships for players remained dormant upon the release of the game. But this was far from the only problem that new players faced. Those who purchased EVE Online with little foreknowledge were met with a game full of promise, yet strangely empty. Played primarily through various menus, it was difficult for new players to decipher what their next steps would be.
Jerks.
What's more, the game world was almost preposterously massive, especially for the time, and players were spread thinly across Eden.
It's so weird seeing a documentary about a game that's still going. You know? Like, EVE's still on. EVE's still going. I saw a promo for EVE just the other day.
Sort of the inception story of Iceland. Vikings escaping taxation from Norway and hoping that there's a new land somewhere.
Like, it legitimately, like, occupies a permanent space on the internet. It's so weird to me.
Has those kinds of feelings. You can look up and see the Milky Way.
Like, for such a long-ass time.
And the country are not far apart. Iceland is this place that really...
I think Guild Wars came out in 2012. It's not really that old.
You get the very distinct feeling of that when you're a child growing up there. There's volcanoes, there's lava, there are earthquakes, there are freezing gale winds unpredictably any month of the year. It's a very hostile
Kidding me, my guy?
EVE is like that. It has the toughest environment, but to some extent,
yeah. Oh yeah, I do kind of like that description that they just.
Nice because we've been forced to learn how to cooperate, because the people who didn't cooperate are already frozen to the ground. EVE is kind of like that. It forces you to cooperate with others because alone you can't really achieve your full potential in EVE. it pushes you to connect with others. There are aspects of the game that
I guess you could say EverQuest has been even
EverQuest
EverQuest evolved. Even EverQuest had a sequel. Hell, Guild Wars had a sequel. I'm playing the sequel.
Forced cooperation due to the
No,
hostileness of
just
the
the-
environment and
We got the
later
first one
on,
out, and
other
we're still
players.
running.
That has created a very strong bond between people that play together in the game. End quote. This forced
I don't think-
cooperation
yeah, I can't think of
manifested
another-
as
well,
new
I mean,
players
World of
quickly
Warcraft,
gathering
maybe.
together for safety in this alien game world.
Yeah,
While
I think
numerous
World of
small
Warcraft.
corporations endeavored to eventually take and hold
The
nullsec
best ship
territory,
is
it was
friendship
much
in EVE
easier
Online.
in this early stage for players to base their operations in Empire space and venture out into nullsec to gather
Isn't that a
valuable
line from the
resources
Batman
these
Lego movie?
unprotected systems, then
got
return
new
to the hall
ships,
and
huh?
sell or utilize what they
Relationships.
gathered. But with so many players traveling through nullsec, a clear method of generating profit emerged, one that played into the fantasies of
Can I
many
do the race
science
yet?
fiction enthusiasts. Piracy.
I
Traveling
think this
together
person
in
is just
small
yeah.
bands, pirates began roving the
I
common
see what they've
lanes
done
that
here.
miners
They've
and
just
traders would
loaded
take
up
from
all their
Empire
skills
space
with as
through
many
nullsec,
minions as
seeking
possible, park their
quarries.
ass right
To do
here,
so,
and they're
pirates
just
would designate
tanking
one or
experience.
more of their group members to act as a tackler, tasked with ensnaring their target, and to do so, they would outfit their ship with specific modules.
Pretty sneaky,
First was the
sis.
stasis webifier, which, when applied to a target, would
I mean, I guess
reduce
that's
their
one way
speed,
of
making it
yeah.
nearly
Every
impossible
single
to
this
evade
one person has
weapons
every
fire.
single minion you
Second,
can
and
possibly
most
equip.
important in
I only have the
Pirate's
one.
arsenal was the warp disruptor, which, true to its name, would prevent a ship from entering faster than light travel and escaping. Both
I
of
can
these
explode
components
my
would be placed
minions
in the mid-power slots,
like this.
making the tackler more
They leave an area
vulnerable than its
effect,
compatriots,
or
and so
when
it
I
would
kill
rely
somebody,
upon its
I
allies
get one of
while
these
engaging a
mini
target.
jagged
This,
horrors
however, would
that
often
spawn.
be unnecessary, as traders and miners were
Ah, see, it
frequently
just died.
unfamiliar
When
with
it
combat,
dies, after a
making
certain
them
amount of
easy
time, it
prey.
leaves a little
To
area
counteract
effect when it
this,
dies.
these more peaceful players would chart new routes and learn tricks to evade pirates, initiating an ever-evolving game of cat and mouse. An early
might as well
player
just summon them
named
both back.
Nightfreeze recounted their experience on their first trading run, shipping
Oh,
goods
this is a
that
cool
they had
story.
bought with weeks' worth of ISK. Quote, at the time, I naively believed that any security rating above 0.0 would be safe because nobody would be ballsy enough to dare provoke the wrath of the 5-0 in space. I turned out to be wrong. I knew that something was wrong when my ship started to beep and a red target lock cursor appeared in the horizon with the name Deathbringer. The beeping accelerated, and a red square appeared around
Note
my
that
ship.
Deathbringer
Since I
is
hadn't
spelt
even
wrong.
bothered trying to fight a training pirate yet, I had no idea what the heck was going on. He sent a message to me, 250k or die. I responded to him, okay, the sweat dripping down my armpits past my side and accumulating in a little puddle at the edge of my shirt. 5 or more seconds must have passed as I fumbled for the micro warp drive hotkey, and just as they started to warm up, the first missile slammed into my ship. The warp gate was 15,000 meters away. I had to be within 800 meters to pass through it, and I was currently flying at about 300 meters per second. A second missile exploded against the hull, bringing down my shields and tearing apart my hull. I knew that if one more missile hit me, my ship would be nothing more than space debris, and this who couldn't even spell death correctly would have access to all I
Fucker, who
had
couldn't
worked
even
for.
spell death correctly.
Come on, you fucking pieces of shit, I shouted at the monitor. My dog started to bark in the background, but I could barely hear it. The only thing that mattered was the gate, because I knew that if I had lost that cargo, all my week's worth of hard work and all my finely tuned bullshit would be down the drain. Whoosh! I hadn't used the micro warp drives since the night before and forgot about just how powerful they were. I was now shooting toward the warp gate at 3.5 kilometers per second, and all Deathbringer had to account for his 2 expensive missiles was a trail of dust. If you're reading this right now, Death, I'd like to give you a hearty f*** you. I arrived at the specified starbase in the Galente region, my ship battered and bruised, and my ego several sizes smaller. I sold the computer hardware for a total of 3.7 million credits. The whole repairs amounted to 100K. I felt my heart with my left hand. It was still pulsing rapidly,
Damn.
and the realization that I had netted 600,000 credits in 25 minutes, along with a healthy dose of action, sent it shooting up even further. I did several more trade routes that morning, and by 9 a.m., my credit count read 5,780,000 credits. End quote.
Ooh!
No matter
What
what
a
tricks were
story.
discovered, however, piracy remained a lucrative trade due to the heavy traffic in the lanes used to haul ore. Because of the distances involved in transporting ore from Nullsec to Empire Space and little safe way to store it during the process, a mining operation would often consist of one mining ship to pull the ore from the asteroids and 5 or more transport ships to haul it back to Empire Space, all of which were easy targets. Soon, piracy was lucrative enough for the first pirate gangs to lay claim
like,
to
I
territory
am
in
deaf.
Nullsec.
It's like a
Outfitted
freaking
with
fork.
various combat ships, they moved into the most valuable star systems, seeking flighty mining and transport ships. On occasion, groups of pirates would find trade routes frequented by the more economy-minded players and perform one of the most feared and most obnoxious practices to those in Empire Space: a gate camp. Essential for transit between systems,
Oh, wait,
Stargates
we're not
also
there yet.
acted as choke
Let's think of
points
something
for
else. Never mind.
players to exploit, as there only ever is one linking two systems together, and so, pirates would often wait at these combined ingress and egress points in low-security space, waiting for unsuspecting players to appear and destroying their ship,
Oh,
sometimes
basically
before they
camping.
could even load the new system. Eventually, CCP were forced to add auto-turrets onto Stargates to prevent routes from being blockaded for long stretches of time. In the months following the release of the game, CCP was also able to address the issue of those who had bought factories for resale by a relatively simple method. In order to keep a factory, the player holding it would be forced to pay a regular maintenance fee for it, relative to the amount of money that could potentially be made from its output. In essence, a land value tax. Just as in the real world, this made the factories a significant financial burden to speculators who weren't using them, leveraging the speculators to either begin producing ships or sell the factories to someone who would. In short order, the factories were serving their intended purpose. The game hadn't even been live for 3 months, and already CCP was being forced to adjust their game to contend with the space game enthusiasts, notorious for exploiting any system that they could as a part of their fun, while simultaneously attempting to complete the systems that they had intended for the game, and these new systems promised to create even more unforeseen and perhaps unmanageable problems.
That is insane. That's like frickin' barely even into production, and they're already having to like massively scale back and scale up certain things just because their player base is so unhinged.
Over the following months, the more adventurous corporations began to establish themselves in Nullsec, and already the diplomatic situations in different regions were developing in distinct ways. These early groups of players, typically no more than a few dozen people, would form the first alliances with one another to stave off competition, typically naming themselves after the region of space that they inhabited. In this early stage of the game, there was no way for players to officially lay claim to territory, but over a decade later, Andrew Groen would resurrect information that had largely been lost by trawling through long-abandoned forum threads
voice
and
has actually
speaking
kinda
with numerous
spooked me for a
leaders from the
second.
time, and by doing so, he managed
It's
to
like, wait,
chart
do I actually
early
have dementia
Nullsec.
now?
To the southeast was the pirate nation of the Curse Alliance, who frequently warred with the rigid and authoritarian Stain Alliance. To the west and the
Star
north were the
Citizen?
Fountain Alliance, the Coalition of Free Stars, and Venal Alliance, which boasted more
I don't know who
democratic
Star
systems
Citizen
of
is.
governance between their constituent corporations. While a significant contingent of players sought to take and hold territory in
good.
Nullsec, most
Yeah, I know
made
what
their
you meant.
home in Empire Space. Though maintaining a nullsec presence was lucrative, it was also difficult and time-consuming, and for most, this was a distraction from the more specific activities which drew them to EVE. This also meant that much of the money within the player economy was held in Empire space, and so, even nullsec powers would have to enter this safer territory and trade with the players there, though many nullsec dwellers found them tepid. For the industrialists, trading with Empire space was not only efficient, but necessary. While the most valuable materials were in nullsec, the basic materials required for all ships could only be found in Empire space, and so it was impossible to maintain a nullsec presence without some sort of supply line to highsec and lowsec. This meant that these two worlds of EVE, while in most ways separate, were fundamentally tied to one another. And while the flow of resources between the two was imperative, the most stark example of this interplay was illustrated in the mercenary corporations. Varying widely in terms of background, these mercenaries would take contracts to harangue whatever target was desired, and during this early stage, their prices were often
paid a whole gold
with
for
the thrill
that.
of the fight being a part of the reward. The people or corporation issuing the contracts could also be kept secret at their behest, and in this way, competitors could be weakened or eliminated without any fighting on the part of the buyer. Pirate gangs were eager to loan out their services for interstellar credits, but many of them were unaccustomed to attacking targets that fought back, and so a niche began to develop for players who had experience not only trapping vulnerable targets, but engaging in proper fleet-based combat. As the demand increased, various new mercenary groups were beginning to form, often out of ragtag clusters of players who were more familiar with the praxis of combat than theory. But sometimes it was simply enough for a player to be familiar with combat to disrupt the supply lines of more economy-oriented corporations and allow their competitors to surpass them. Such aggression meant that most every corporation needed to be prepared for a fight, and so they began to learn the methods by which to defend themselves, along with hiring their own mercenaries to protect their ships, meaning that anyone paid to disrupt another corporation had to expect pushback. While miners often weren't familiar with the finer points of combat, many already had the most important equipment necessary to participate: a battleship. During this time, there were no ships dedicated to mining, and so miners chose the ships with the most available high slots for
miners
mining
can play
lasers.
this?
A particular favorite was the Apocalypse, which boasted 8 high slots and a large capacitor. All the miners had to do was trade their mining equipment for weapons, and they were ready to defend themselves in a minimal fashion. What had once effectively been paid piracy was more and more becoming obsolete, and in its place was mercenary work. Among these early mercenaries were a few corporations that attracted attention. Unparalleled were the Masters of Ownage, or Mu, who had become infamous after their gate camp in Mara.
I should look into that. You know, there might be a YouTube documentary somewhere about it.
Corporations that were beginning to gain a reputation, namely Body Count Inc. This group, led by the charismatic Celine, was one of the first to dedicate all of their corporation's time to handling mercenary contracts, and while they accepted paltry sums to begin, their fees grew as both the demand for mercenaries and the demand for Body Count Inc.
Yeah, look at all this stuff.
But as mercenary corporations fought
it's not
one
normally
another,
this aggressive
there was a surprising effect,
with like throwing
since
stuff at
warfare
you.
never resulted
But
in the
Halloween
permanent
event
deaths
is
of any of the
oh my
players.
goodness! Speaking
It
of throwing stuff
was
at you,
possible to fight against particular enemies repeatedly, and as they did,
but
they grew familiar
the Halloween
with one
event
another,
is especially like,
those
aggressive
who could fight
with like giving you
exceptionally
stuff.
well. Such exemplary pilots would sometimes impress their
Plus,
enemies
it's just
so
a fun
much
map.
that they would be invited to join those they had fought. And so, a core tenet of EVE Online was discovered. In the words of Celine, quote, "The best way to recruit people is by shooting them." And so, the best pilots in the game began to conglomerate into groups and charge
basically
hefty prices for their services.
Oh
Prices
shoot!
that
Look at
corporations
that!
were more than willing to
I
pay
actually got a
in this
candy
key moment in the
corn
history
cub.
of
That's
the
a
economy of
first.
EVE. During the production of the game, one of the envisioned roles in EVE Online was that of a trader, traveling from location to location in order to find places to buy goods low and sell high based on an asymmetry of information. Players would only be able to see the goods on offer in their current region, and then they would have to travel to the station where the good was being sold. But as players traded with one another and the player economy began to establish itself, the need for a centralized hub of commerce grew. In order to maximize visibility and convenience, many chose one particular system from which to base their trade: Ulai. Ulai was a natural choice, given that it was a high-security system with the maximum value of 1, meaning that trading there was remarkably safe. But more importantly, it resided at the precise center of Empire space, making a trip to Ulai a reasonable distance, no matter where a player was.
I'll be right back.
Soon, all manner of
since I've seen
players
this
were
already,
traveling to Ulai in order to buy and sell goods, and almost anything could be purchased there. This posed a problem. So many players in a system taxed the game servers heavily, and if too many people began to use Ulai as a trade hub, then the servers would be unable to accommodate them. But soon, an even greater existential threat to the game would appear. Toward the end of 2003, the deal that CCP had made with its publishing companies was concluding, but Simon & Schuster had no intention of renewing the deal, and so they reached an agreement that would return the publishing rights to the game developer. And while they had no infrastructure or connections to print physical copies of the game, CCP had another plan. On December 3rd, 2003, CCP made an announcement on their website. Quote, CCP, the developer of the highly acclaimed MMORPG title EVE Online, announced today that it has regained the publishing rights for the title worldwide and will start distributing it as a direct download from the internet. We are very pleased to be in a position where we can contribute equally to both development and publishing, says Ivor Chris Jensen, CEO of CCP. We have reached an agreement with Simon & Schuster Incorporated and Vivendi International regarding Canada and North America, as well as with Crucial Limited for Europe. We expect the downloadable version to increase global sales sharply. Our player base has been growing steadily since the launch of EVE Online in May. Our game servers are in good shape, and we are technically ready for much faster growth now, says CCP's chief technical officer. The player community is a great source of new ideas for the future development of the game. EVE Online is an evolving, living game, and we can't wait to see how the players will react to some of the new stuff we will be adding in the future. They are lying through their teeth. End quote. But this optimism was undermined by the problems that Ulai now presented. As mentioned previously, the game's server architecture was designed so that each region in the game world was managed by a different server. However, the newest processors at the time proved to be suboptimal for CCP's purposes, and so, even the latest CPU technologies wouldn't help to bolster their servers for the influx of players, specifically the growing population in Ulai. Theoretically, this could have been solved by changing the regions that each server managed and perhaps utilizing a specific server for Ulai, but with the volume of players that Ulai threatened to host, not even a dedicated server for that star system would be enough. What's more, players were beginning to discover exploits that threatened their faith in the game to function as it was intended. On March 3rd, 2004, a corporation named Zombies Inc. descended upon Ulai with a single Apocalypse battleship and a bevy of dedicated logistics ships, parking themselves near a stargate, approximately where players would arrive when entering the system or approaching the gate to leave. The Apocalypse was equipped with a special kind of weapon. a smart bomb.
Yeah,
When
this is
activated,
insane.
this niche weapon would deal massive damage
so
to
crazy.
everything within a certain distance of the user, whether ally or enemy. As soon as ships appeared, the pilot of the Apocalypse activated his smart bombs, and his targets were instantly destroyed. As Uli was a system with a 1.0 security rating, Concord appeared almost instantly in order to destroy the offending player, but as soon as they did, the logistics ships began repairing it from just outside of the radius of the smart bombs as Concord's ships approached and were destroyed in the successive blasts. Now, not only were hapless players being destroyed in Uli, but so were the game's NPC police. While Concord attacked the Apocalypse battleship,
killing
the
the
logistics
police.
ships were entirely ignored. This was due to an oversight that Zombies Inc. had discovered. While attacking another ship in Empire space would grant the player a wanted status and summon the police, repairing another ship would not, even if the player receiving the repairs was wanted. Having estimated the damage output of Concord's ships, Zombies Inc. had brought just
This is a
enough
really
logistics
helpful graphic.
capability to outpace the damage that Concord could deal, making the Apocalypse practically invulnerable. Any players attempting to intervene by attacking the logistics ships would, in turn, be destroyed by Concord,
Found the players.
since, by the game's definition,
Damn.
they were innocent. And so, they were able to continue their slaughter in Uli for
Oh,
an
look at that guy. He's
unrecorded
actually got a
period
proper
of time.
scythe. Lucky.
Victims of
Those are
Zombies Inc.
expensive.
went to the forums to complain, and soon, even those who hadn't encountered the small fleet were complaining to the developers that trade through Uli, and therefore in much of the game, have been brought to a halt due to an exploit. CCP's game masters contacted the perpetrators and instructed them
Oh, I'll have to check
cease.
that video out. Thanks for the
Zombies,
suggestion.
Inc. declined. A post made to the forum by the game masters
If you have
describes
by the way,
the
actually,
incident
you know,
in full.
post suggestions
Quote,
like that in the
"As a lot of
Discord.
you
That
are
way I
aware,
don't
a
forget.
certain corp willingly
Like there's a
exploited fault
channel
in the game
in the
mechanics and
Discord
managed to
specifically
kill
for
over
suggestions and
100
stuff like
people
that.
in the
So
supposedly
like
secure
if you
UI
join the
system
Discord and
last
like
night. We
post
have
them there,
decreed
like I'll be
that
sure to
those
see
who were
it
the
and then
recipients
I'll
of
watch
this
them on the
heinous
stream.
crime will be fully reimbursed for their loss. If you are one of those who lost your belongings and still haven't petitioned us, please do so, and we will see to it that your possessions are returned to you.
It's also
The
helpful
exploiters
because
have received a
YouTube
ban
kind of
for their
sucks at
efforts,
notifying
and
people when my
anyone
streams
thinking
go
of
up.
following their example
So
should
like
be
if you're on
aware
the
that the
Discord, you'll know
same
when my
fate
streams go
awaits
up for
them.
sure.
The GM team. End quote. While players were in general glad to have the Uli system cleared, this set a new precedent. With pompous rhetoric, the game masters declared that they would not allow players to bend the rules farther than CCP dictated, but how much was too much was left unspecified. In this case, a rule was codified and enforced as an event was taking place, namely that players were not allowed to survive indefinitely against Concord in high security space. Anything that allowed them to do so would be considered an exploit, and therefore a bannable offense. However necessary it may have been, and however popular the decision may have been with players, it established the company in an adversarial role to many of its players, especially the ones most interested in experimentation. Though trade could once again travel through Uli, this did not lead to the rise of any powerful high-sec corporations due to a particular mechanic. While players were safe from wanton attacks from other players in high-sec space, and players in low-sec space were risking their lives by attacking other players, there was a way for players to attack one another
Lies.
safely, even while
Well,
Concord
real
was
money's
present.
involved.
A war declaration. By paying a fee every week, a corporation could declare war against another and be granted
I'm not
the
sure how
right
much
to
money all
attack
this
any of
translates
their
to in the
ships
real
on
world,
site,
but real money's
often
involved
referred
now.
to as bribing the police. This meant that, whenever a high-sec corporation became powerful enough, other corporations would band together to check it and prevent it from becoming too powerful and affecting a monopoly. Even so, there were enough individuals and small corporations trading out of Uli that the servers began to lag. This was not
I'll
a
stick with
difficult
my funny
threshold
fun,
to reach. Despite
theme park
boasting about
MMO,
high
thank
potential
you.
player counts, EVE Online required less than
Where we
100
make things go
players
boom.
to be present in the system before problems began to manifest. But as Crowd Control Productions was contending
my
with
character is
Uli,
adorable
the
as fuck.
initial powers of Nullsec were beginning to fracture, and soon divisions would spark conflict that would push their server infrastructure to its limits.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Every MMO eventually devolves into this.
To the north,
This just
bad
noise,
blood
just
born
noise.
from the early wars over sovereignty was beginning to heat. Due to the global nature of the game,
Well, I guess not every
Critics
MMO.
realized
No,
that
I'm sure
implementing
EVE
a fair
Online
method of
has its
territory
moments of
control would
devolving into
require
nothing but
something more
noise.
complicated than a simple attack and hold method. Otherwise, a corporation could simply attack another group's territory during their off hours, and then a counterattack could be launched, enacting a never-ending back and forth which would discourage any sort of decisive conflict. Therefore, they designed the reinforcement system. In order to capture a starbase, a
Whoa.
faction would have to attack it twice. The first time, they would simply be able to reduce its hull to 25%. Upon reaching this number, the starbase would enter reinforcement mode, during which it could not be damaged for a length of time contingent upon the amount of stronium fuel with which it had been equipped, with more stronium meaning a longer reinforcement period. Most importantly, since stronium gradually was depleted, the amount could be manipulated in order to bring the starbase out of reinforcement mode during active hours for the defending alliance. In this way, holding starbases was feasible without always having players online. But these stations were more than just static buildings. Player-owned stations, or POSes, were designed in such a way as to allow a defender an advantage.
That guy
Most immediately,
really
a station
always
could
such
be
a pain to
equipped with
get them
automatic
down.
weapons that required no player input, adding firepower to any defensive endeavor. Even unequipped, however, the station still boasted a wide shield which could only be passed if the player had the correct password. While the station could be attacked from the outside, any ship within the shield could not, but similarly, any ship inside the shield could not attack any ship outside of it, granting a small armistice zone to which a defending fleet could retreat during a battle,
Okay,
and
cool. I can
placing
go
an
above
onus
100,
upon the
so,
attackers
yeah.
to either focus enough fire on the station
like
to
I can
reinforce
collect
or
plenty of
destroy it,
those.
or destroy any damaged ships before they could retreat to the safety of
Yay,
the
more
shield.
toilet paper.
Extra ships could be stored inside of these stations as well, allowing players to
Oops.
re-equip
Don't
themselves
waste
for
it.
combat if they lost their ship. In
Don't
order
waste
to
toilet
claim a
paper, not
system,
during a
all a
pandemic.
corporation had to do was own the majority of starbases.
Bad taste.
Now was a key time to claim and capture territory before anyone else could lay their own claims and force their
Like
opponents to
Warhammer
wrest
40k,
control
but
for
somehow
them.
more
As well as
expensive.
starbases
Man, I
being
can't even wrap
constructed,
my brain
it is
around the
extremely
lore
vulnerable.
behind
Mercenary
40K.
Coalition
That-
even
that
posted a
is- that
video
stuff
to
goes
the
hard.
forums of the time they were hired exclusively to stand as bodyguards for an infant starbase, which they affectionately referred to as an egg. Once claimed, the owning faction could place an outpost in the system, a significant boon. As opposed to POSes, outposts were indestructible, making goods stored there much safer. But they also acted as places where goods could be listed for sale. Anything bought or sold there, or any minerals refined there, would be taxed, with the money being placed in the bank account of the corporation. Taking territory now, before other alliances could place their starbases and claim control over systems, was vital, and it would lead to a war that the servers of EVE Online could scarcely handle. The opening engagement of this first large-scale war of EVE Online was described by Andrew Groen in Empires of EVE. Quote, "Both sides opened fire, unleashing a stream of missiles, railguns, and laser munitions, the sheer number of which had never been seen before in New Eden. With nearly 300 people in the battle, the EVE servers strained under the weight of this enormous cataclysm, and strange things began to happen. Missiles disappeared out of thin air, ships exploded seemingly without having been touched, pilots were kicked offline without warning, then reappeared in a different part of the solar system and in a different ship." End quote. Such conditions were unfavorable for either side, and fleet commanders eventually learned to ration their pilots and limit the size of engagements in order to manage lag and prevent battles from escalating beyond the capacities of the servers, a frustrating yet necessary decision. But Nullsec wasn't the only place where these limitations were manifesting. For months, the central economic system of Uli in Empire Space had been growing, and as it did, the servers were struggling. Crowd Control Productions had little
Jeez,
ability
look at
to
this mob we
control
got
the
going
movements
on.
and actions of the people operating in Nullsec, but in Empire Space, they had far more options, and here they took drastic action. Uli was a popular trading hub due to its centralized location, which boasted safe passage from all corners of space.
Oh, wait till
And
they
so,
get to the
the
Titan
company
stuff.
took the
That
simplest
then,
option.
yeah. Wow.
They severed most of the connections. In short
This is
order,
all
the
pretty
traders had
insane,
scattered.
really.
Without a central hub, trade quickly was redistributed into quadrants of Empire Space, loosely based in the 4 different NPC empires, further destabilizing a market that already was facing the destabilization of vital resources from Nullsec due to a war raging in the north. Without the relatively safe routes through Uli, Empire Space was severed in two by low-security choke points through which traders had to travel, choke points that could easily be exploited by pirates, further segmenting the economy. But soon, a new strain would be placed on the servers. In early 2004, the main competition for EVE Online, Earth and Beyond, was ending. EVE had already enticed many of its players away in the beta stages of its game, and now, as Earth and Beyond was closing its servers, a sizable portion of its players were migrating to EVE Online. While CCP's digital distribution method was a gamble at the time, and it could easily take over 24 hours to download the game with contemporary internet speeds, it meant that those moving from Earth and Beyond to EVE Online could easily download the client for the game and join relatively quickly, attracting a massive influx of players. Recognizing how many new people were joining, and also recognizing how impenetrable their game was, CCP set to work making their game as inviting as possible for this flood of players. Working with IGN and GameSpy, they cheekily offered what they called an upgrade for Earth and Beyond
get more
players
hero
to
points,
EVE
goddamn.
Online, including a personal guided tour of the game. In a public release, they stated, quote, "The upgrade program will include a no-obligation free trial of EVE Online and a walkthrough of the game by a member of
Just
the
wait till
EVE
you
volunteer
hear what
group.
the
The
absolute
e-volunteer will
genius
explain
named
to
the first
user the
Titan ever
differences
made in
between
this
the two
game.
games and ease the transition into
It'll
EVE
strike
from Earth and Beyond.
more fear
End
into
quote.
your
These
heart
new
than
players were entering
death
the game during
itself.
a time of extreme instability in the in-game economy, and only a few months after these new players joined and were attempting to establish themselves, Nullsec was fractured.
Wait.
The offer that CCP had
who are
made
you
to Earth
locking
and
on to,
Beyond
Fix?
players proved to be a resounding success, and many groups in the dying game moved wholesale from one game to the other, providing them with an immediate source of manpower. However, those more aimless players coalesced into a new corporation which they named Celestial Horizon. With thousands of players, the already massive Celestial Horizon had a far larger population than the vast majority of other corporations in New Eden, and even though they were inexperienced, their numbers alone quickly made them into an industrial superpower who spent their early months in Empire Space stockpiling liquid assets, their size making them largely unassailable. This chaos meant opportunity for many new players, and some of the loudest were the Goons. Goon was an
Okay,
epithet
yeah,
worn
here we
proudly
go.
by the
Now
early
the
internet
Goons.
users
Yep.
posting on the Something
They're-
Awful forums.
they're
a group
classy.
known
They're a
for
classy
their
bunch.
irreverent,
That's the
provocative
name.
manner. As online documentarian Bernie notes in his history of the site's operator, even the name Goon originates from the letter of an angry web admin who had been featured on the Something Awful website and subsequently harassed by its forum members. Noticing the extremely accessible method of distribution that CCP had adopted, some members of the board began posting threads encouraging other members to download the game and join. However, due to their
Titan
inherently
McTitan
chaotic
face.
nature,
That would
it was
actually be
difficult
better.
to wrangle them toward any
Titan
common
McTitan
goal,
face.
and over the months, numerous goon-led corporations congealed and collapsed due to petty infighting. Andrew Groen chronicles the early months of the Goons' presence in the game, where, after numerous attempts, one leader was able to coax enough of them into a single corporation, which was named Goonfleet. Their capabilities, however, were obviously lacking, given that almost every single player entering the corporation was entirely new to the game, with their only qualification being that they were a member of the Something Awful forums. They even paid to have banner advertisements displayed on Something Awful, encouraging members to join Goonfleet, hoping to attract a large volume of players, regardless of skill. When a new member joined Goonfleet, they would immediately be given a ship and a personal lesson on how to play the game, but even so, they were woefully ineffective. This was a feature that they owned and incorporated into their fleet tactics. Rather than trying to field effective ships, they simply would outfit themselves in some of the cheapest ships and modules that the game had to offer and swarm their target. The majority of the time, this would end in failure, but because
Why do
so
the
little
monsters
capital
keep
had
showing
been invested,
behind the
the
door?
losses
It's so
were never
annoying.
substantial, and so they would throw themselves wantonly into battles, declaring their motto in the local chat: "We're terrible at this game." Their
That's so
practices, however,
stupid.
gave them a particular reputation with the
What
rest
an
of
obnoxious
New
way to
Eden.
play a video
Only those
game.
who had an active account at least 3 months old on the Something Awful forums were allowed into the corporation, but those who applied
Absolutely
were always simply
obnoxious way
rejected.
to do
Responding
anything.
to a threat from
God.
someone looking to join a
Oh, I see. It
corporation,
opens up the
one
same way
player
either
said in
way.
the EVE Online forums that, quote, "Goonfleet don't recruit in-game. Any advice you get to the contrary will be from a goon trying to swindle
Goon
you
Squad
out
got
of
the
your
tactics
assets.
from
They'll
Russia.
charge an application fee or some such. Then, when you are successful, they will offer to courier
Well,
your ships down to Nullsec.
You know, we
After you
were
hand over your property, you will not hear from them
not
again."
gonna say it.
End quote. Another player responds, quote, "If by some strange and bizarre miracle you do get into Goons, you will be forever shunned by the rest of the EVE community. Once you join Goons, that's it. You can never leave to join another corp or alliance. You simply cannot be trusted in any other corp or alliance. You might as well just delete your character and start over if you want to leave Goons." End quote. While this was somewhat hyperbolic, it captured the general sentiment of New Eden. There were the Goons, and then there was everybody else. While their money wasn't boycotted, few wanted much to do with them besides trade. As Nullsec grew more competitive, it became clear that the Goons would need allies, and so they created a larger alliance under which all Goons and those corporations within the game who wanted to join them could participate. Goonswarm. The work The History of the Great Empire of Eve, an outsider's perspective, speaks to the reputation of the Goons. Quote, "To best understand Goonswarm, you must first understand Goons. The Goons are not native to EVE Online, but rather are a form of invasive species. The defining psychology of the community is that there is us and there is them. Non-members are inferior to members, and many Goons delight in the misery of non-members, or pubbies.
Yeah,
EVE
I mean,
Online
it's
is not
trolling,
the first game
basically.
to be
It's
visited
like
by the
it's
Goons,
really
nor will it be the
expensive
last.
trolling.
The Goons move like locusts between online games, establishing themselves quickly and attempting to conquer the game in order to inflict the most misery for all those not part of the swarm. Almost every major competitive online game has a clutch of Goons, deconstructing the game and their enemies."
I
End quote.
guess.
These alliances that established themselves were taking advantage of the final period of time in which a new alliance could feasibly capture and hold territory for years to come, and the radical shifts in the fundamentals of the game would establish what would become the first great
wait, I
empires,
thought that was a dead end.
bending their industrial might for control over weapons that could decide an entire battle with the press of a single button.
Gary. Also, flex tape. Or with one single drop. You can also end this galactic chaos with one single drop of flex tape.
On June 29, 2005, CCP
Slap it on with the power of Zeus.
important among them being two new classes of ships. Dreadnoughts were a specialized class that wielded weaponry designed to attack the stations that had become vital for warfare.
Oh.
Controlling a station allowed the fighters of a defending or invading
Ooh,
force
that
to
one's fancy.
shelter in a safe hub from which they could launch their
Looks like a
fleets.
straight up, like,
Dreadnoughts
Jedi.
wielded the firepower to assault such bulky emplacements. Much larger than battleships, formerly the largest class of ship in the game, dreadnoughts could enter siege mode, which would render them entirely immobile but grant a significant firepower increase.
Just
Constructed
cleaning out the
dreadnoughts
castle at this point, guys? Is that what we're doing?
requiring new starbase modules called capital ship assembly arrays.
Oh, okay.
Rather than
Oh, that's what's going on. There's
there
a
were
big
multiple
there's a big
components which
guild
had to be
thingy going on.
separately and then combined to create the complete
Okay,
dreadnought.
that
In
explains
order
why
to
there's so
move the
many
massive
people
amount of
running around.
materials required for such a ship,
It's a
the
guild
second
event.
class that they announced was the freighter. Significantly larger than their older counterparts, these freighters were capable of moving materials on an unprecedented scale. But while they were typically well armored, they would still be obvious targets for pirates and saboteurs. The implication was clear. In order to project power and protect what territory
Actually,
they had, alliances
That's a good
would
point.
have forced
Goonswarm.
and leverage their economies into production. But the dreadnoughts were eclipsed.
Goonswarms are expensive
Later,
trolls.
with the release
Elon Musk, hold my beer.
on December 16, 2005, CCP released an expansion entitled Red Moon Rising. This time, 3 new ship classes were released. The first was the Carrier, a massive ship that relied on clouds of fighters to perform combat for it, intended
I
as
don't know how the
support for
volume
a
got
fleet
turned
of
down
smaller ships.
that
On the
low.
release page, CCP explained
quite that
that,
low before.
quote, the Carrier is an affordable capital ship, and most major corporations are expected to fund and deploy at least one for their engagements. End quote. The second
this
was the
guy.
Mothership,
This
a
guy
larger
so much.
variant of the more affordable Carriers. But these 2 new ship classes were eclipsed almost entirely by the ship that
Sorry,
would
I
come
scratched
to
my
be
beard for a
synonymous
second.
with the game. The Titan. The sheer immensity of a Titan was difficult
There
for
we
players
go.
to conceptualize when it was announced. For the first 2 years of the game, the largest ships were the battleships, whose volumes hovered between 450 and 500,000 cubic meters. The largest Titan, in contrast, was
Look
an
at
utterly
that.
massive 155 million
What
meters
the
cubed,
actual
well
shit?
over
Like,
300 times as large.
bruh.
The capabilities wielded by a Titan were commensurate with its size. The first key feature was the
Not
ability
even
to open
conceivable.
a jump bridge. While Titans were able to utilize the traditional Stargate network outside of HiSec, they also could be used to coordinate massive fleet movements.
Like,
If
I
another
would have
specialized
such a hard
ship could
time
light a
picturing that without that
Sino-Churl
crap.
field, then the Titan could use it as a beacon and jump directly to its location, whether in the same system or not, bypassing the Stargate network entirely, as long as the stars were close enough. This meant that, although the Titan was a ponderous ship, it could still rapidly relocate with proper coordination, sometimes directly into a fight, suddenly shifting the balance of power. What's more, other ships could join the Titan in this jump, meaning that it could be used to move an entire fleet at once
That's pretty
between stars
dope.
in great strides, without being forced into the natural choke points of the Stargate network. But the more tantalizing capability of the Titan was the Doomsday device. While CCP was mum about the specific damage numbers, what was known was that a Doomsday device would inflict massive damage in a 500-kilometer radius, centered on a location of the Titan's choosing. What's more, the Titan would not even need to be present in the fight to launch the Doomsday. If another ship could light a Sino-Churl field, then the Titan could fire its Doomsday through it, as long as it was still within the same star system. Many suspected that the first alliance to field a Titan would wield unprecedented power and become nigh unstoppable. Due to its area of effect, the power of a Doomsday scaled with the number of fighters on the battlefield, and over time, battles involving hundreds of players had become more and more common, further emphasizing the imminent importance and dominance of the Titan. Beyond these
That's
more
exciting.
immediately impressive features,
Like,
the
that's
Titan
genuinely
also serves
exciting.
as a
Like,
mobile
like,
platform from which
what
war
an
could be
interesting thing to
prosecuted.
just suddenly
Players
drop
who
on your
died could
entire
respawn
player
inside of
base.
the Titan and take a new ship stored in its hangar to join the fight once again, meaning that a player whose pod was destroyed would be able to rejoin combat immediately, as long as supplies were available. But before
Imagine
their
just being in the
incredible
middle of
might
an
could be wielded,
ordinary
one would have to
fight
be
with,
built.
like, between
Much
guild, and
like
all of
the
a sudden just,
dreadnoughts before them, the different
that
parts
just
of
shows
the
up and
carrier,
it's like, oh
mothership,
man, game
and
over,
Titan
man,
would
game
need to
over.
be constructed separately in different capital shipyards, then brought together and assembled. No power based in Empire space would have the resources or capital required for such a massive undertaking, and even if one did, they would have war declared upon them immediately, and their capital shipyards would be divested from them. But even in Nullsec, Andrew Groen notes that there were only 2 alliances who could feasibly produce the first Titan, and they so happened to have laid claim to territory immediately next to one another. The warlike band of brothers, who had earlier crushed the alliances in the north, and the overwhelmingly massive Ascendant Frontier, consisting of former players from Earth and
Guy
beyond.
that
Of
the
these
clan
two,
that actually has
Ascendant
an impressive
Frontier had
looking
the clear
logo.
advantage. While skill and coordination could readily win a battle
Like, that
during
looks
this
like
stage
something
of the
out of
game,
straight up
there was
Starship
no way
Troopers.
to
That looks
outproduce a
impressive.
group with so many members. As Groen notes, quote, Ascendant Frontier was not focused on expansion or military endeavors as Band of Brothers was. Ascendant Frontier had come to own a huge swath of territory in the south, but its members' true passion was industry. Ascendant Frontier wanted to create a prosperous hub of trade and commerce in Nullsec. It was working, too. It was pumping out space stations, outposts, and capital ships at a rate many times faster than the next closest industrial powers of the era. End quote. But to accomplish this feat, they would have to overcome a new hurdle: espionage. While often neglected in the first few years of EVE Online, its role in the operation of large alliances had increased, as had its notoriety after a particularly high-profile case. While most mercenary groups specialized in combat, another corporation,
guy doesn't
named the
teleport all over
Guiding
the map.
Hand Social Club, would instead perform contract work for clients looking to subvert their enemies. Sometime in late 2004
That's
or
also
early
an interesting
2005,
logo
an anonymous
for a,
client approached the Guiding
a
Hand
group.
with a contract and a massive
I
sum
almost
of
called them a
ISK,
guild, but I
hoping
guess
to
they're
buy
not
their
really
services
guilds,
to
are they?
target Ubiqua Seraph, a large corporation of the time. They asked that Ubiqua Seraph's coffers be ransacked and their communal hangars emptied of ships, but the contractors would be allowed to keep all of what they pillaged. The only object that the client wanted was the corpse of the CEO, Mural. The leader of the Guiding Hand, Istvan Shogatsu, was similarly disinterested in the spoils, though he accepted these terms all the same. The Guiding Hand spent months infiltrating,
Jeez, that's
earning
hardcore.
positions of trust and authority. They were more successful than their client could have dreamed. Multiple members found themselves entrusted with much of the corporation's
this
assets,
is fucked.
and one agent, named Zemdal, found themselves as one of Miral's lieutenants. Istvan explained, quote, Arenis Zemdal is what we call a Valentine operative. Essentially, his job is to seduce and entice an objective into a state of trust and confidence. As such, we'd call Mural's relationship to him moments before the strike endeared. End quote. On
He's
April
actually like
18,
an Emperor
2005,
Palpatine
the
guy.
code word was
They're
sent to
actually
every
saying
agent.
he's like their Emperor
Nicole.
Palpatine.
Immediately, the corporation was drained of all
supposed
of
to,
its
like,
liquid
seduce people
assets
to the,
and
like,
much of its
fucking
stores of supplies,
gain their
and
trust.
Zemdal collected the
What is
CEO's
this?
corpse along with a squad of Guiding Hand members who had rendezvoused to help deliver the killing blow. Istvan made a public announcement shortly after, with characteristic flair. Quote,
Yeah.
Greetings, everyone. It has been some time since I last stood behind a podium and made a public announcement, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm somewhat out of form. The reason I stand here before you is to announce that my mercenary outfit, the Guiding Hand Social Club, has completed its most ambitious contract to date. Our target was assigned to us many months ago, Mural of Ubiqua Seraph. Our task was to carry out that which the Guiding Hand Social Club has now become known for, to utterly demolish Mural and bring all who followed her to their knees in one fell swoop. For those many months we toiled, secreting our operatives among her ranks, steering her organization through a number of insidiously engineered events meant to engender trust and divert their attention from where it should have been. Early this morning, our hard work bore fruit. Executing a meticulously
Isn't that
planned,
just so fucked like a
thoroughly
goddamn
flawless
supervillain?
concerto of
Like
simultaneous
actually
corphanger
coordinating
heists,
people
attacks in
to
open space,
pretend to be
facility
like in their
invasions,
guild
the
just to
Ubiqua
like
Seraph
to
came to
backstab
know
them.
the wrath of the Guiding Hand Social Club firsthand.
Like
The
the
result
brother, like
shatters any
the
previous
Dark
records
Brotherhood,
for sheer scale of
fucking
such an endeavor.
assassins.
Our net gain from this massive heist is roughly estimated at over 20 billion ISK. Total damages inflicted are estimated at close to 30 billion ISK. Thank you all for your time. End quote. This would be far from the final major act of the Guiding Hand Social Club, though they would be more covert from this point forward. This level of metagaming, however, wasn't shared by all people. Most role players,
Most people were not
would
this
attempt
insane.
to play the game as a character within the game world, but those who didn't roleplay often regarded them with derision and saw them as potential targets, either for ridicule or aggressive action. While discussing EVE Online for her podcast This Game Changed My Life, Aoife Wilson posits that, quote, "The people you're talking to don't know that the talking part is a game too. You're going in, you're making friends, you're gaining their trust, you're spending a lot of time with them. They're being nice or whatever, and you know you're lying to them to the point of screwing them over." To which her co-host, Julia Hardy, replies, quote, "When you play a game, you are aware of what the structure and the rules of the game are because everyone's playing by the same rules. That's how you know it's a game. But then, if someone comes in and completely changes all the rules, but no one else is aware of the new rules, then it just doesn't seem like a fair game." End quote. These early years began to establish the rules by which people would play EVE Online. Where other games of its ilk were played mostly within the game world, and this was generally respected by the other players, real-world duplicity was gradually becoming a normal and expected part of New Eden, whether the existing players wanted it or not. Many of the first capital ships were destroyed before even being completed, thanks to the spy networks and scouting work from rival
God,
corporations.
this game could be such a fever
But
dream
finally,
sometime.
on September 25th,
Extreme LARPing.
2006, 9 months after
I mean,
Titans
I
were
can
first
understand getting
introduced
into your
the
character
game,
and stuff,
the
but like,
refugee
you
players
know,
from Earth and Beyond and Ascendant
that's a bit
Frontier
much.
completed the first Titan. Triumphantly, their
Although,
leader, Psyvok,
to be fair, he
delivered the capital
did
system
have the
of
right
the
to gloat a
Alliance,
little bit
allowing
there.
everyone
That
to
was quite
marvel
the
at the
that was
finished
quite
Avatar-class
the
Titan,
coup
which
to
he
pull
named
off.
Steve. The origin of this name is in contention.
Yep, there it
Most
is,
sources believe that it was
Steve.
named after the late Steve Irwin, who had died earlier
Nope,
that month.
it's not.
But Andrew Groen recalls that Psyvok attributed the name to a scene from the animated film Over the Hedge, released 4 months prior, in which the squirrel character Hammy comedically proposes naming the massive, newly erected hedges Steve. Whatever the origin of the name, the completion of
Welcome
Steve
to the internet.
heralded war. Immediately, their enemies and
Have
band
a
of
look
brothers invaded,
around.
but the power of Steve the Titan blunted their advance simply with the threat of its presence until December 11th, 2006. During a large-scale battle, Psyvok unleashed his doomsday safely through a cynosural field, then jumped to a safe point 20 systems away. But what happened next would change the paradigm of players for years to come, and would pit Band of Brothers against the rest of New Eden. More importantly, though, it would also begin a process that would sour the relationship between the developers of EVE Online
Yeah,
and its
and
players.
this is about where I was at, like, give or take. But yeah, I remember what comes next too. It's not great. It's not great. Not a great look. And it's kind of what I was talking about before.
Game development in the early 2000s
That
was
made me think of
significantly
this.
different than it would become 2 decades later. Developing a game typically took only a few years at most, and once a game was completed, it was common for the studio to immediately begin work on something new. MMOs were no
No,
exception. Most of them
it
would run
was
for
named
few
after a
years,
fucking
then die as the
really
player
bad
base
joke
moved on
in
to
a
play
really
something else.
subpar movie.
This had already happened to EVE's main competition, Earth and Beyond, and the developers all expected that EVE would suffer the same fate eventually, as a matter of course. But as the game approached the 4th year of its lifetime,
It
it
wasn't
seemed
going
that it was
nowhere.
only growing. CCP had created plans to continue adding features, and what's more, they were preparing to launch the game in China, a massive new market, though China would have its own instance separate from the rest of the world.
Because
While this
China.
was good news for the company, many of the original developers
We
were
have our
beginning
own
to grow
space.
restless. They hadn't
We have our own
expected to work
space,
on
it's
EVE
better.
for more than a few years, and a number of them were looking forward to
Better than
making
you-
something
what
new.
the fuck,
While
China?
CCP
Come
had
on.
plans for other projects within
China, the
EVE
epitome
intellectual
of
property,
taking my
they were
ball
in
and
need of
going
new
home.
Developers, and so they
Just
decided
you,
to
you
hire
embody
some of
that.
their
You
staff
embody
directly
take my
from their
ball and
player
going
base.
home,
In
China.
many ways, this was a logical
That's
decision.
you. You're
Hiring
that
players
forever.
meant that they were passionate and knowledgeable about the game, and they would be conscious of concepts and problems of which an outside hire might otherwise be ignorant. It also meant
Ah,
that they
just
would
die.
need less
I'm not
training
even
to learn about the
Trying to fight you,
intricacies
really. I
of
just want you to
EVE.
go away.
Besides technical know-how, these developers would typically
just wanted to
continue
carve up
to
that
play
pumpkin.
even after being hired, which meant
Oh my
that
God,
they were
just
passively
die.
listening to the information that
Freeze
flows
in
through the
hell.
undercurrent of New Eden in the form of word of mouth, rumors, and propaganda. In this way, they could adjust the servers quickly to anticipate battles that were about to take place and reduce the effects of lag, as well as gather information for balance changes faster than they otherwise would be able. But these new hires created unique problems. Those players willing and able to accept work at Crowd Control
Ah,
Productions
shoot.
were
Oh,
often
I'm nowhere
among the
near
most dedicated and active, and
the
for
race.
many, EVE had become a significant part of their lives, deliberately altering their schedules so that they were able to add their firepower to important battles and assist their corporations and allies. Real friendships were frequently formed and broken due to in-game conflicts, while some were burned for in-game advantages. For these players, the boundaries between EVE Online and the real world were either blurry or non-existent. When these players became developers, they gained access to the dev tools
they've had
and
mount
commands.
races for a long
This
time, my
power
guy.
was too tempting for some, and they began to utilize these permissions to their own ends, creating rare and valuable items for their
There's all kinds of
corporations
stuff in
and
Guild Wars.
alliances. For example, blueprint originals used for building ships and components were in extremely limited supply, as no new ones could be made, and so most people had
I
to
did
buy
one earlier.
copies that would be consumed after only a few uses. Using commands, these player developers could create brand new blueprints for their corpmates and themselves.
They're pretty
Hilmar
fun.
Pedersen, CEO of CCP, noted during an interview for Down the Rabbit Hole that on 5 separate occasions, the problem had become so bad that he had to invite the offender into his office and offer them a choice.
Oh.
Stop playing the game or stop working at Crowd Control Productions. Twice, the developer chose to leave the company so that they could continue playing.
He was
So
given
great
2
was the role of
chances.
the game in their
2.
lives. It was with knowledge of
After he
these
was
bad
caught
actors
cheating
that,
using
as
his
Rowan
developer
wrote
privileges.
years later, Psyvok, leader of Ascendant Frontier and pilot for Steve the Titan, accused a Band of Brothers member of malfeasance.
I'm not gonna make it.
In an interview for a Swedish radio program translated for
Nah,
Empires
race
of
already
Eve,
started. Damn
Psyvok
it.
said, quote, "Suddenly, one of the CCP
Nobody's even in the
interstellar
race. I
news
could have
corp
had
ships
that.
just
I could have had
appeared
that
out
all
of
to
nowhere
myself.
and started to orbit my Titan. 2 seconds later, I was bumped offline, a total coincidence, I am sure, and about 3 seconds after that, so was my alt."
Damn it.
End quote. Those who are more dubious of Psyvok's claims noted that after a recent patch, it had become much easier to scan for Titans, And so, while finding Steve by pure chance was unlikely,
Dude,
it was
no, the
still
mounts don't get
technically
food or
feasible.
anything like that.
What
You just have
precisely
different
happened
mounts.
is contentious, and no definitive proof has
Oh,
been
can I join in
released.
at the last
But
minute?
However, the
Okay.
location of Steve was divined. The leaders of Band of Brothers received word
I guess
that
it's
Steve
because
the
it's only the
Titan had been
computers
discovered,
playing.
and they immediately
Come on, leave me alone,
gave the order
just
to
leave me
mobile.
alone. Just leave me
In a matter of
alone. I want to
minutes,
race.
A Cynosure field was lit at Steve's
Ah, no,
location,
don't attack
and the
him.
entirety
No,
of
he's gonna
Band
join.
of Brothers fleet jumped in to see Steve alone, inert, and inactive. Immediately,
yeah,
the dreadnoughts went into
Bye,
siege mode
Steve.
and
Steve's not
unleashed
gonna
their
make it.
payload into the hull of Steve, which could only
All
wait
because
passively
of sour
in the end.
grapes from a dev.
Steve the Titan exploded and was reduced to rubble. The first Titan to be built was now the first Titan to be destroyed. The members of
Rest
Band
in
of
Steve.
Brothers were ebullient, and soon the loss of
What the
Steve
fuck was
became common knowledge all throughout New Eden. To honor its death, Steve's ruined corpse would remain in the system of C9N TAC-CC, where it was destroyed, so that players may still return to it and pay their respects. The death of Steve had made
fuck,
many
I'm never gonna
players
make it now.
suspicious, but soon an event would occur to
Ah!
unite all of New
Forget it.
Eden against Band of Brothers, and more importantly, alter the relationship between the players and the company on a foundational level.
Yeah, that's pretty sucky, Band of Brothers. Or like Band of Cheaters. Okay, well, I got my streaming in for the day. Thanks for tuning in. I got stuff to do today. Please join the Discord server so you can suggest other games, other videos, other maybe suggest a drawing for me to do once I get this drawing streaming underway again. Just still working with my schedule and all that. Please remember to like and subscribe. All that good stuff. And thanks again for tuning in, Ezekiel and Sloppy Joe. I will see you guys fairly soon. Maybe later tonight. I don't know. But yeah, I got plans. So I will see you next time.